The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's sky without warning. It hung there, silent and dark against the blue. Commander Jack Gray stood on the roof of Earth Defense Headquarters, his eyes fixed on the strange vessel. It was 3 times larger than the biggest human spaceship. "What do you think they want?" asked Dr. Tom Ben, who stood beside him. Gray shook his head. "No idea. But they haven't fired weapons yet. That's something." The alien ship had arrived 6 hours ago. Since then, every military base on Earth had gone to full alert. Fighter jets circled in holding patterns. Missile systems were armed and ready. The world held its breath. Then came the message, broadcast on all radio and TV channels. "People of Earth, we are the Vex. We come to meet you." Now Gray and Dr. Ben waited with 10 other officials in a hastily prepared meeting room. The walls were lined with armed soldiers. The air felt thick with tension. The door opened, and 3 aliens walked in. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with bodies covered in smooth gray-green exoskeletons. They wore clear helmets over their heads, with tubes connecting to packs on their backs. Their 4 eyes, 2 large, 2 small, blinked at different times as they looked around the room. "I am Torque, first ambassador of the Vex Exploration Fleet," said the alien in the middle. Its voice came through a translator box on its chest. The sound was flat but clear. Gray stepped forward. "Commander Jack Gray, Earth Defense Fleet. Welcome to our planet." Torque's upper eyes narrowed. "Your world interests us. We have watched you for some time." "We had no idea anyone was watching," said Gray. "Your detection technology is basic," said Torque. The 2 aliens behind him made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Dr. Ben moved closer. "We're eager to learn about your people and share knowledge." "Share?" Torque turned his large eyes toward the doctor. "What could you possibly teach us? Your civilization is young. Your bodies are soft and weak. Your lives are very short." Gray felt his face grow hot. "We may surprise you." "I doubt that," said Torque. "We Vex live for over 1,000 of your years. Our bodies can heal from almost any injury. We can survive in space without protection for short periods." He tapped his clear helmet. "We wear these only as a precaution when visiting unknown worlds." "Then you find our atmosphere safe?" asked Dr. Ben. "Safe enough for short exposure," said Torque. "Though we find it unpleasant." Gray noticed how the aliens stayed far from the humans, keeping close to the door. Despite their words, they seemed nervous. "We propose a series of tests," said Torque, "to measure your species' abilities against our own. This will help us decide if you are worthy of further contact." "Tests?" Gray didn't like the sound of that. "What kind of tests?" "Physical strength, speed, intelligence, endurance." Torque's smaller eyes blinked rapidly. "Unless you fear to be shown as inferior." Gray looked at the other officials. Most nodded slightly. "We accept," he said finally. "But these tests must be fair." "Of course," said Torque, but the clicking sound came from the aliens again. "We will begin tomorrow." After the aliens left, Dr. Ben pulled Gray aside. "Did you notice they never removed their helmets? Even after saying our air was safe," he whispered. Gray nodded, and they seemed uncomfortable, like they couldn't wait to leave. "I'm going to analyze the air readings from when they were here," said Ben. "There's something they're not telling us." Gray looked out the window at the alien ship, dark against the setting sun. "They think we're weak. They want to prove it." "Maybe," said Ben. "That's exactly what we want them to think." The first test took place in a large field outside the city. Crowds gathered behind barriers while news cameras broadcast worldwide. The Vex had set up strange equipment that glowed with blue light. "A simple strength test," explained Torque, standing tall in his environmental suit. "Your strongest humans against our average crew members." Captain Mike Lee, a military advisor to Commander Gray, whispered, "I don't like this. They're making a show of it." Gray nodded but said nothing. The world was watching. 3 human champions stepped forward. An Olympic weightlifter, a wrestling champion, and a military strongman. They looked impressive, with muscles built from years of training. The Vex sent out one of their crew members. It looked smaller than Torque, but its exoskeleton gleamed in the sunlight. The test was simple: move heavy objects from one spot to another. The human champions went first, straining to lift the metal blocks that weighed nearly 500 pounds each. They managed to move them, but with great effort. When the Vex took its turn, it lifted the blocks easily, almost carelessly. The alien moved twice as fast as the humans, showing no signs of strain. The crowd fell silent. "As expected," said Torque loudly. "Your muscles are inefficient. Your bones too fragile." The next day brought a speed test. Human sprinters raced against another Vex crew member. Again, the alien won easily, moving with a fluid grace that made the humans look slow and clumsy. "Their leg structure is different," Dr. Ben told Gray that evening. "They have natural advantages. But I've been studying the data from our sensors. There's something odd about their suits." "What do you mean?" asked Gray. "They're filtering everything. Not just taking oxygen in, but keeping something out. I think Earth's atmosphere bothers them more than they admit." Captain Lee joined them, his face grim. "The public is getting worried. These aliens come here, mock us, and prove they're better at everything. What's their real goal?" "I don't know," said Gray. "But keep your eyes open during tomorrow's test." The third challenge tested intelligence and problem-solving. 5 human scientists competed against 1 Vex. The alien solved complex equations and puzzles faster than the humans, its 4 eyes blinking as its clawed hands moved swiftly across the touch screens. But Dr. Ben noticed something. "Look at the Vex's movements," he whispered to Gray. "They're getting slower. And see how it keeps adjusting its suit controls." Gray did see. The alien seemed to be struggling with something, though it still completed the tasks faster than the humans. That night, in a secure lab, Dr. Ben showed Gray and Captain Lee what he had discovered. "I've been analyzing samples from the air near their suits," he said. "Their environmental systems are working overtime to filter out oxygen and nitrogen compounds." "Those are everywhere in our atmosphere," said Lee. "Exactly," said Ben. "What if their homeworld has very little of these elements? What if what we breathe every day is actually toxic to them?" Gray's eyes widened. That would explain why they never take off their helmets, and why they seem uncomfortable here. "I think their bodies evolved in a completely different environment," said Ben. "They're physically stronger, yes, but they're like deep-sea creatures brought to the surface, out of their element." "Can we use this?" asked Lee. Gray looked thoughtful. "Not yet. We need more proof, and we need to understand exactly what in our air affects them. For now, we keep playing their game." "The endurance test is tomorrow," said Ben. "That's our chance to gather more data. If I'm right, they may not be as superior as they want us to believe." "Good," said Gray, "because I'm tired of being looked down on by beings who can't even breathe our air." The endurance test was held in a large dome built specially by the Vex. Inside, the air felt strange, drier, thinner somehow. Dr. Ben carried a small device in his pocket that measured air composition. "They've changed the atmosphere in here," he whispered to Gray. "Less oxygen, almost no nitrogen. It's closer to what I think their home world might be like." "Cheating already," muttered Captain Lee. The test was simple but brutal. Run laps around the dome until exhaustion. 5 human marathon runners stood ready. A single Vex waited at the starting line. "Begin," announced Torque. They started running. The humans immediately felt the difference in the air. Their breathing became labored. Their steps grew heavy. Still, they pushed on, professional athletes trained to endure. The Vex ran smoothly, its exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. One by one, the human runners dropped out, gasping for breath in the thin air. After 1 hour, Only one human remained, his face red with effort. After 2 hours, he finally collapsed. The Vex continued running, showing no signs of fatigue. "Again, we proved superior," said Torque. "Your bodies require too much oxygen, too inefficient." That night, Dr. Ben worked frantically in his lab. He had collected samples from the dome and from near the Vex ship. Gray and Lee watched as he analyzed the data. "I've got it," Ben said finally. "The Vex home atmosphere has almost no free oxygen, less than 2%, and very little nitrogen, mostly inert gases like argon and neon." "So what does that mean?" asked Lee. "It means," said Ben, his eyes bright with discovery, "that our normal air would be like breathing pure rocket fuel for them. Our atmosphere is incredibly reactive compared to theirs." Gray leaned forward. "Their suits aren't just for breathing. They're protection." "Exactly." Ben pointed to his screen. "Look at these historical scans of their planet. Almost no plant life. No photosynthesis. They evolved in an environment with minimal chemical reactivity. That's why they're physically stronger," said Lee. "They don't need muscles that can process oxygen efficiently." "Right," said Ben. "They're adapted for a totally different biochemistry. What we consider normal would be extremely dangerous to them." Gray paced the room. "We need to prove this. But how?" Ben thought for a moment. "The mental challenge tomorrow. It's in their ship. I need to get a sample of their actual ship atmosphere, and—" he hesitated. "We need to see what happens when one of them is exposed to our air. Not enough to hurt them, just enough to confirm my theory." "That's dangerous," said Gray. "More dangerous than letting them think we're weak," asked Lee. "They're testing us to see if we're worth keeping around. What if we fail their tests?" Gray nodded slowly. "What do you need, Ben?" The next morning, they boarded the Vex ship for the mental challenge. 5 human scientists would compete against Vex in solving complex problems. The humans wore special suits provided by the Vex, supposedly to protect them from ship contaminants. Ben had hidden a small device in his suit that could collect and analyze air samples. As they walked through the ship, he secretly gathered data. The test began. Complex mathematical problems appeared on screens. The Vex solved them quickly, but the humans kept pace better than expected. Ben noticed how comfortable the aliens looked here, moving faster and more confidently than on Earth. Halfway through the test, Ben's device beeped softly in his pocket. He had enough data. Carefully, he pressed a button on his wrist controller, sending the information back to his lab on Earth. While everyone focused on the test, Ben studied the Vex environmental suits hanging on the wall. Backup units for emergencies. He needed just one more piece of evidence to confirm his theory. And then, as if fate decided to help, an alarm blared through the ship. Red lights flashed as the alarm continued to sound. The Vex moved quickly, their 4 eyes blinking rapidly in what seemed like panic. "Ship stability error," announced a mechanical voice. "Minor breach in outer hull section 5. Atmospheric containment at risk." The human scientists looked at each other nervously. Gray moved closer to Ben. "Is this our chance?" he whispered. Before Ben could answer, Torque rushed toward them. "You must return to your shuttle immediately," he ordered. "This is a minor issue, but safety protocols must be followed." As they hurried down a corridor, one of the Vex technicians suddenly stumbled. Its environmental suit made a hissing sound. A small tear had appeared where the helmet connected to the body section. The alien froze, its 4 eyes widening in what could only be terror. It clawed at the tear, trying to seal it, but it was too late. Earth's atmosphere, which had been slowly leaking into the ship through the hull breach, was seeping into the suit. "Help!" it cried, its voice translator crackling with static. "Containment failure." 2 other Vex rushed to assist, but kept their distance, unwilling to risk their own suits. The affected alien's exoskeleton began to change color where the air touched it, turning from gray-green to a sickly yellow. The alien fell to its knees, making high-pitched sounds of pain. Ben stepped forward. "Let me help," he said, pulling a sealant patch from his pocket. He'd brought it just in case, having suspected the Vex vulnerability. Torque blocked his way. "No, do not approach. Return to your shuttle now." But it was too late. Everyone had seen what happened. The alien's exoskeleton was visibly deteriorating, where Earth's air had touched it, bubbling and flaking away like metal in strong acid. Other Vex finally reached the fallen crew member. They covered him with a protective blanket and rushed him away. But the damage was done. The humans had witnessed the Vex's critical weakness. Once back on Earth, Gray, Ben, and Lee met in the secure lab. "Did you see that?" Lee said, still shocked. "Our air burned through its skin like acid." Ben nodded, working quickly at his computer. "The data confirms it. Their biology is based on chemical processes that are stable only in low oxygen, low nitrogen environments. Earth's atmosphere is literally corrosive to their tissues." "All this time," said Gray, "they'd been acting superior, but they're terrified of our world. They can't even breathe here without protection." "And think about what this means," added Ben. "Humans evolved on a planet with one of the most chemically reactive atmospheres they've ever encountered. What they see as our weakness, our soft bodies, our need for oxygen, is actually our strength. We harness chemical energy that would destroy them." Gray looked thoughtful. "That's why they're doing these tests. They want our planet, but they'd need to change its atmosphere completely before they could live here." "Which would kill all life on Earth," said Lee grimly. The communication screen buzzed. Torque appeared, his 4 eyes blinking in an irregular pattern. "Commander Gray, the competition is suspended temporarily. We must discuss recent events." Gray nodded. "Yes, we should. In fact, I'd like to propose a new type of test. One that measures adaptability rather than raw strength." Torque's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Your crew member will recover." "Yes," said Torque after a pause. "Though he suffered damage that will take time to heal." "I'm glad," said Gray, his voice firm but not unkind. "And now, I think it's time for honest talk between our species. We know what your atmosphere is like. We know why you find ours dangerous." Torque was silent for a long moment. "You understand more than we expected," he finally said. "Perhaps there is more to discuss than we thought. We will meet tomorrow." After the screen went dark, Lee turned to Gray. "What now?" "Now," said Gray, "we negotiate from a position of strength. They may be physically stronger in their environment, but we're the ones who evolved to thrive in chemical fire." The meeting room was different this time. The Vex had agreed to meet in a human building, but they brought their own atmospheric equipment. A clear wall divided the room. Humans on one side, Vex on the other. The air on the Vex side glowed slightly with a greenish tint. Torque and 2 other Vex sat across from Gray, Ben, and Lee. For the first time, the aliens had removed their helmets inside their sealed environment. Their faces were smooth, with no nose or mouth, just breathing slits along their necks. Their 4 eyes blinked in patterns that seemed to show nervousness. "We will speak openly now," said Torque, his voice coming through speakers. "The incident on our ship has changed things." Gray nodded. "Yes, it has. We know your species can't survive in our atmosphere. It burns your exoskeletons and probably damages your internal organs." Torque's smaller eyes blinked rapidly. "And yet you breathe this corrosive mixture as if it were nothing. Your cells use oxygen, a destroyer of molecules, as fuel. It is difficult for us to understand." Dr. Ben leaned forward. "Our biology evolved to harness oxygen's reactivity. We turn what would be poison to you into power. Plants on our world actually produce oxygen as waste." One of the other Vex made a sound like a hiss, producing toxins as waste. "Your world is more alien than any we have encountered. And that's why you want it," said Captain Lee. His voice was hard. "You plan to take our planet after proving we weren't worthy of it." Torque's upper eyes narrowed. We seek habitable worlds. Yours has the right gravity, temperature range, and mineral composition. Only the atmosphere would need to be adjusted. Adjusted. Gray's voice rose. You mean stripped of oxygen, which would kill every living thing on Earth. Your species would be relocated, said Torque. At least those who proved worthy in our tests. The room fell silent as the humans absorbed this information. The Vex had planned to judge humanity, keep the worthy few as specimens, and terraform Earth to suit themselves. Finally, Gray spoke. Let me show you something. He pressed a button, and screens lit up around the room. They showed forests, oceans, deserts, cities, Earth in all its diversity. This is what your tests miss, said Gray. Life on Earth doesn't just survive in this oxygen-rich environment. It thrives because of it. Our atmosphere isn't a handicap. It's the source of our power. He showed more images, humans climbing mountains, diving in oceans, exploring caves, building cities. We've adapted to every environment on our planet, Gray continued. From the highest mountains to the deepest seas, we've learned to use the chemical energy in our air to fuel our bodies and our civilization. Dr. Ben added, our cells contain special structures, mitochondria, that safely harness oxygen's reactivity. Our bodies are filled with enzymes and antioxidants that protect us from oxygen damage. What you see as frailty is actually highly evolved chemical engineering. Torque and the other Vex watched the screens, their eyes blinking in complex patterns. Our tests measured physical strength and speed, said Torque slowly. But perhaps these were not the right measures. No, agreed Gray. The true test of a species is adaptability, the ability to turn challenges into advantages. Torque was silent for a long moment. Then, we have much to consider. Our reports on your species were incomplete. Perhaps, suggested Ben, instead of more competitions, we should exchange knowledge. Your technology is impressive. You've mastered interstellar travel. We've mastered living in a chemically reactive world. Yes, said Torque, his voice softer now. There may be value in such an exchange. As the meeting ended, Lee whispered to Gray, do you trust them? Gray watched the Vex returning to their ship, each step careful, each movement guarded against the dangers of Earth's air. I think they're frightened of us now, he said. They came to judge us and found we're the ones who breathe fire. A week passed. The Vex ship remained in orbit, but the competition had ended. Instead, scientific teams from both species began careful exchanges of information. The humans provided data on Earth's biology. The Vex shared details about their space travel technology. Dr. Ben spent most of his time in a special laboratory built to allow both species to work together. The room had 2 sections with different atmospheres, separated by clear walls with special transfer chambers for passing equipment and samples. Your cellular repair systems are remarkable, said Kell, a Vex scientist who worked with Ben. You constantly fight against oxygen damage. Every day, your DNA breaks and repairs itself thousands of times. Ben nodded. What you call damage, we call living. Our entire metabolism depends on controlled oxidation reactions. And these plants, said Kell, studying images of Earth's forests, they actually create the very substance that would destroy us. To make food from light. Extraordinary. In another part of the building, Gray met with Torque to discuss the future of their relationship. The Vex leader seemed less arrogant now, more thoughtful. We have reviewed all data, said Torque. Your species possesses abilities we had not recognized. You live in an environment that would kill us in minutes without protection. And you can travel between stars, replied Gray. Something we've only dreamed of. Torque's eyes blinked in a pattern that Gray had learned meant consideration. We have identified 14 planets in nearby systems with atmospheres similar to our home world. Planets we could colonize without changing them. And none like Earth. None, said Torque. Your world is unique in our experience. a planet where oxygen breathers became the dominant form of life. Gray leaned forward. So what happens now? You came here looking for a new world to colonize. You found one that would require removing all its life first. That option is no longer being considered, said Torque quickly. His eyes blinked in what Gray had come to recognize as embarrassment. We underestimated your species, and we have learned that there are alternatives. Later that day, Ben showed Gray and Lee his latest discoveries. The Vex have incredible materials technology, he said excitedly. They can create structures at the molecular level that would revolutionize our space program. And they're fascinated by our biochemistry. Why? Asked Lee, still suspicious. Because we've solved problems they never faced, explained Ben. Their evolution took a completely different path on a world with minimal free oxygen. They never developed the cellular machinery to handle reactive chemistry. And that matters to them because, prompted Gray. Because it limits where they can go, said Ben. They can only visit worlds with atmospheres similar to their home planet. Anywhere else requires heavy protective gear. But with our biochemical knowledge, they might develop better protection, maybe even temporary biological adaptations. And what do we get? Asked Lee. Gray smiled. Space travel, medical technology, material science centuries ahead of ours, a potential ally in a universe that might contain threats worse than the Vex. The next day, Torque presented a formal proposal. The Vex would establish a small research base on Earth, in a sealed environment, of course, to study human biology with permission. In exchange, they would help humans improve their space technology. This agreement benefits both our peoples, said Torque. We learned from your remarkable adaptability to chemical reactions. You gain the stars. Gray looked at Ben and Lee before responding. Ben nodded eagerly. Even Lee gave a grudging nod of approval. We accept, said Gray, but with conditions: full transparency, equal exchange of knowledge, and a clear understanding that Earth remains under human control. Torque's 4 eyes blinked in agreement. Of course, we no longer see your species as inferior. Different, yes, but worthy of respect. From enemies to partners, said Gray. All because you finally understood what makes us strong. Yes, said Torque. You breathe fire and call it air. 5 years passed. The partnership between humans and the Vex grew stronger each year. On the edge of the Sahara Desert stood Harmony City, a marvel of combined technology. Half the city was filled with Earth's normal atmosphere, while the other half contained the inert gases the Vex needed to survive. Between them were research centers where both species worked side by side, separated only by special transparent barriers. Gray, now Admiral Gray, walked through the human section with Dr. Ben, who had become the lead scientist for human-Vex cooperation. The first Mars colony ships launch next month, said Gray, looking at the massive spacecraft visible through the dome above them. Built with Vex engine technology, but designed to carry humans. Ben nodded. And the Jupiter Research Station will follow 6 months later. We've accomplished more in 5 years than we might have in 50 without their help. They entered the central meeting hall, where Torque waited on the Vex side of the barrier. The alien leader's exoskeleton had a new silver-blue color, a sign of high status among his people. Admiral Gray, Dr. Ben. Torque greeted them, his translator now producing nearly perfect English. I bring excellent news. Our homeworld has approved the exchange program. Gray smiled. That's wonderful. How many students will they send? 20 young scientists, said Torque. They will study Earth's biochemistry under Dr. Ben's guidance, and you will send 15 humans to our world. Yes, confirmed Ben. All volunteers, eager to learn about Vex physics and engineering. They've been training in the special environmental suits you designed for us. Torque's eyes blinked in the pattern they now recognized as happiness. A historic moment. The first humans to visit another star system. After the meeting, Ben showed Gray his latest project in the sealed laboratory. We've finished the prototype, he said proudly, pointing to what looked like a thin silver suit. Using Vex material science and our biochemical knowledge, we've created a survival suit that will allow a human to breathe normally while protected from almost any environment. Gray examined it. No bulky oxygen tanks. No need, said Ben. The suit material itself extracts oxygen from almost any atmosphere or liquid and filters out toxins. It can even pull oxygen directly from water. Like having gills. Better than gills, it works in environments no Earth creature could survive in. With this technology, humans will be able to explore worlds we never imagined possible. Through the clear barrier, they could see Kel working on a similar project, a new type of environmental suit for the Vex. And they've made equal progress, Ben said. Their new suits can protect them from our oxygen-rich air for up to 72 hours without recharging. They're learning to venture into environments that would have killed them instantly 5 years ago. Later that evening, Gray stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling research city. Captain Lee, now General Lee, joined him. "Did you ever imagine this?" asked Lee, gesturing at the mixed human Vex city below. When they first arrived, Gray shook his head. "Never. I thought they were invaders. They thought we were primitives. We were both wrong. And now we're heading to the stars," said Lee, "because they underestimated us." "No," Gray corrected him, "because we both learned to see strength in difference. They evolved in a world where chemical reactions happened slowly, where structures could last for thousands of years. We evolved in a world of constant change, where oxygen tears things apart and rebuilds them." Below them, in the central plaza, human and Vex children met at the clear dividing wall, placing their hands against opposite sides of the barrier, examining each other with curiosity rather than fear. "The next generation won't remember when we were enemies," said Lee. Gray nodded. "They'll grow up knowing that across the universe, life finds different paths to survive. What seems like weakness from one perspective is strength from another." As the sun set, the lights of the city glowed brighter, warm yellow in the human sectors, cool blue in the Vex areas. Different colors, different atmospheres, but the same stars shining above them all. "They came to mock us," said Gray softly, "and stayed to learn from us, just as we learned from them. All because they analyzed our atmosphere," said Lee with a smile, "and discovered," Gray finished, "that what doesn't kill you makes you human."